I landed in Sweden with my wife, expecting a week of quiet streets, old towns, and late-night walks along the canals. Instead, I came home to a half-empty hotel room, an empty seat on the flight, and a message from her that said, "Don't be mad, it's just a prank." My name is Michael Grant. I'm 39 years old, project manager from Denver, and until that morning in Stockholm, I thought my marriage was intact. I thought my wife, Amanda, was the kind of person who knew where the line was. She didn't. She crossed it, and in doing so, set off a chain of events neither of us saw coming. At first, I thought there had been some mistake. The boarding pass I held in my hand was no longer valid. The airline staff looked at me with sympathy when they explained my reservation had been altered, my seat released. Amanda had made adjustments online the night before. She had flown home. Without me. I stood at the terminal window, watching planes lift into the pale northern sky, my phone buzzing in my pocket. Her first message came while I was still processing what had happened. "Made it to the gate without you. Huh, you should have seen your face." The next one followed minutes later. "Don't worry, babe. It'll make a funny story someday." That was her tone, light, dismissive, as if stranding your husband in a foreign country was a harmless joke. I didn't answer. Not then. Not for hours. The silence was my first response. It unsettled her. By the time she landed in New York the next morning, her messages had grown longer, filled with laughter at her own cleverness. "It was hilarious," she wrote. "You'll get over it." She was wrong. The truth is, I didn't feel rage. I didn't storm through the airport demanding answers. I didn't throw accusations across the Atlantic. I went quiet. My strength has always been silence, the kind that unsettles people more than shouting ever could. In that silence, I started to plan. I found a small cafe across from the station and ordered black coffee. Pulled out my notebook. Wrote down 3 things: observe, secure, respond. Old habits from my father, who spent his life in the military. He taught me that chaos is best handled with order. And if you're blindsided, you don't lash out, you gather intel. That's what I did. I documented everything. Screenshots of her messages, the updated flight itinerary, the digital traces she'd left behind. I wasn't sure why I was doing it yet, but instinct told me I'd need it. Her prank wasn't just reckless. It revealed something I hadn't wanted to face. She didn't respect me. 7 days passed before I gave her a reply. 7 days of silence while she called, texted, even left voicemails where her laughter sounded thinner, more strained. 51 attempts to reach me, all ignored. On the 7th night, sitting in a quiet apartment in Gothenburg, I finally answered with a single message. "Thanks for this, honey. Elsa has been the sweetest." The silence that followed wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. The morning after I sent that message, I woke to 10 missed calls and 3 voicemails. Amanda's voice was different now. No longer playful, no longer smug. It was strained, almost panicked. She asked who Elsa was. She demanded answers. She apologized, then accused, then pleaded again. All in the span of 48 hours. Her panic didn't touch me. In fact, it clarified something. Silence was working. I didn't explain. I didn't soften the edges. Instead, I followed my father's code. Observe, secure, respond. I moved into a short-term rental apartment in Gothenburg, paid in cash, and left no forwarding address. My phone stayed on, but my responses stayed minimal. I wanted her imagination to work harder than my words ever could. And it did. While Amanda unraveled stateside, I started building my own structure. I walked the streets, studied the city, and allowed myself to breathe without her constant noise. I began to think about our marriage in a way I hadn't before. 13 years together, and yet she had seen nothing wrong with leaving me behind like discarded luggage. A prank, she called it. That word stayed in my head like a shard of glass. Every day, she sent more messages. Photos of our house. Updates about mutual friends. Screenshots of her flight bookings, asking me when I'd be back. She even mailed me a letter through International Express, as if paper could pierce the silence I was holding. The letter smelled like her perfume, but the words carried no weight anymore. They were the desperate scrawls of someone who had underestimated the power of absence. I didn't sit idle. I documented everything. Every call, every message, every letter. Each one went into a digital folder labeled proof. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about clarity. About making sure that when I finally moved, I wouldn't stumble. Quiet moves require patience, and patience was something I had in abundance. On the 5th day, she wrote that she missed me, that she hadn't been sleeping. On the 6th day, she accused me of punishing her unfairly. On the 7th, she cracked. "Who is Elsa?" That was the message that came in, capitalized, sharp, like a blade across the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I went for a walk through Haga, the old district with cobblestone streets and warm cafes. I sat in one of them, ordered coffee, and listened to the quiet hum of conversations around me. That's when I realized something. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing control. By the time I returned to my apartment, 51 missed calls sat on my phone. I scrolled through them without answering a single one. At the bottom of the list, one voicemail stood out. Amanda's voice cracked as she said, "Please, Michael, just talk to me. I'll explain. I'll fix this. Don't shut me out." I saved the recording, filed it with the others, and sat back in my chair. This wasn't about fixing anything. This was about dismantling something that had been broken long before Sweden. And I knew, with the same cold clarity I had in that airport terminal, that the real game had just begun. On the 8th day, Amanda's tone shifted from pleading to hostile. Her messages arrived in rapid succession, each one sharper than the last. She accused me of humiliating her, of playing games, of inventing some woman named Elsa just to torture her. But I never mentioned Elsa again. One word was all it took. Silence did the rest. I didn't answer, but I read every word. I watched how her composure cracked. At first, she was the prankster who thought she was clever. Then she was the wife trying to laugh it off. Then the anxious woman trying to reel me back. Now she was something else entirely, a desperate partner grasping for control. Each shift told me more about who she truly was than 1,000 conversations ever could. That night, I turned off my phone and logged into our joint bank account instead. Numbers don't lie. I scanned through transactions, and what I found didn't surprise me. Small withdrawals, patterns of spending she hadn't mentioned, designer clothes, dinners, hotels in Manhattan when she claimed to be working late. She had lived a parallel life while mine was tied to spreadsheets and deadlines back in Denver. I didn't rage. I didn't slam my fist on the desk. I just saved the statements into my folder labeled Proof. Amanda had underestimated silence. She thought ignoring her was an emotional reaction. She didn't understand it was a strategy. While she panicked, I gathered. While she scattered, I focused. On the 9th day, she broke pattern. No calls, no texts, just a single email. Long paragraphs about love, regret, about how the prank went too far. At the end of it, she wrote, "If you're with someone else, I'll understand, but please don't throw away 13 years over this." That line stayed with me. Not because of what it said, but because of what it revealed. She didn't ask if I was with someone. She assumed. Her guilt was showing. I let 2 days pass. Spent them walking the city, drinking strong Swedish coffee, and thinking about what came next. I remembered my father's words. You don't counter-strike in anger. You wait for your opponent to expose themselves. Amanda was doing that with every desperate move. All I had to do was let her. By the 10th day, she could no longer hold her silence. She called my office in Denver. She reached out to colleagues, asking if they had heard from me. Word traveled fast, and soon a coworker forwarded me her voicemail. Her voice was cracking, nearly unrecognizable. "Please, if he calls, tell him I love him. Tell him I just want him to come home." But I wasn't going home. Not yet. Instead, I rented a car and drove out of the city, up the coastline where the air was colder, sharper. I checked into a seaside inn, paid in cash, and set my phone on the nightstand. It buzzed every few minutes with new calls, new messages, new attempts. I let it buzz. By then, Amanda wasn't the only one watching the silence. I was too, and I saw clearly what it was doing. It was making her reveal everything she had tried to hide. She thought she was breaking me. In truth, she was unraveling herself, and I wasn't about to stop her. By the 11th day, Amanda's silence broke wide open into action. She had stopped leaving voicemails that begged. Now she left instructions. "Call me by tonight, or I'll get on a plane. I don't care what it costs." That was her last message before I powered my phone off completely. I didn't doubt her. Amanda had always been impulsive, always quick to throw money at problems when patience would have done better. If she came to Sweden, she'd expect me to meet her at the airport, arms open, ready to forgive. But she didn't understand me. Forgiveness wasn't on the table anymore. I spent the next day at the inn's library, a quiet wood-paneled room that overlooked the sea. The waves outside were relentless, striking the rocks in steady rhythm. It reminded me of my own approach. Calm on the surface, pressure building underneath. I opened my laptop and began assembling the file. Screenshots of her messages. Bank statements with suspicious charges. Voicemails where her voice cracked under stress. Every piece of evidence arranged, labeled, secured. Not for confrontation yet, but for the moment I would need it. On the 12th day, she followed through. A flurry of airline confirmations landed in my inbox, all forwarded from her email. She was booked to land in Stockholm that evening. She hadn't sent them to me directly. She'd sent them to our shared travel folder, the one we had always used for vacations. Maybe she thought I still checked it. Maybe she wanted me to. Either way, I saw it. I didn't rush to meet her. Instead, I stayed where I was, hours away on the coast. I let her fly across the ocean, let her drag her luggage through customs, let her step into a city where she expected me to appear. And then I let the silence swallow her whole. That night, while I sat by the fire in the inn's lounge, I turned my phone back on for the first time in 2 days. 32 missed calls appeared instantly. The newest one was from an international number. Her voice was sharp with exhaustion. "I'm here. Where are you?" I saved the recording and turned the phone off again. The next morning, a knock came at my inn door. Not Amanda. The innkeeper, holding out a folded note with my name scrawled across the front. "American woman left this for you," he said. The handwriting was hers. Inside, she'd written only 6 words. "Talk to me. Don't do this." The irony struck me. 13 years of marriage, and the first time she truly wanted to talk was after she tried to erase me from her life as a joke. I burned the note in the fireplace, watched the paper curl into ash, and sat back down at the desk. Amanda thought crossing an ocean would force my hand. She was wrong. All it did was show me how far she was willing to chase the silence. And I was ready to see just how far she would go. On the 13th day, Amanda's reach grew wider. It wasn't just her voice flooding my phone anymore. It was others. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years, her co-workers, even her mother. Each message carried the same urgency, the same accusation. "She's worried sick. She says you disappeared. Call her back. Michael, you're scaring everyone." But I wasn't the one creating fear. I was simply holding a mirror to Amanda's choices. The silence wasn't punishment. It was revelation. And now her panic was leaking into every corner of her life. I listened to the messages one by one in the quiet of my seaside room. Her mother's voice was brittle with concern. A friend's voicemail was sharp, almost hostile, demanding I stop playing games. They all repeated Amanda's words like an echo chamber. None of them asked what she had done. None of them knew about the airport, the flight she stole, the empty seat she left behind. That detail mattered. She hadn't told them the truth. She framed herself as the victim, not the architect. And in doing so, she revealed something I had always suspected. She cared more about her image than the reality beneath it. I didn't respond. Instead, I documented. Each message went into the folder, each voice recorded and labeled. It wasn't evidence of her guilt exactly, but of her manipulation. Proof that her instinct was to control the narrative, not confront the facts. By the 14th day, she escalated again. A text from her attorney appeared on my phone. "Your wife has expressed concern for your well-being. Please contact her immediately to avoid escalation." It was formal, polished, almost clinical. I filed it away with the rest. I wasn't rattled. Pressure only strengthens resolve when you've already committed to silence. That evening, I sat by the water, the wind cutting sharp across the surface, and thought about what Amanda must be feeling in Stockholm. Alone, desperate, pacing through the same streets we had walked together days before. She had crossed an ocean expecting to find me waiting. Instead, she had found only her own reflection in the silence. On the 15th day, she changed tactics again. No anger, no demands. Just a single message. "I love you. Come home. Please." The words looked fragile on the screen, but I knew better. They weren't about love. They were about control slipping through her fingers. I closed the phone, set it aside, and poured myself another cup of coffee. Silence had carried me this far. Breaking it now would undo everything. Amanda thought she was chasing me. What she didn't understand was that I was leading her, step by step, choice by choice, into a place where the truth could no longer be hidden. And I was in no hurry to end the chase. By the 16th day, Amanda's desperation took on a new face, her father's. A voicemail arrived from a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakable. Calm, heavy, layered with the authority of a man who had spent his life commanding rooms. He said Amanda was distraught, that I needed to stop this childish silence and return home. He said marriage was about forgiveness, about moving past mistakes. His words carried weight, but not truth. He didn't know the story. He only knew Amanda's version, the one where she was the victim and I was the ghost. I let the message play twice before saving it into my archive. Evidence again, not of guilt, but of reach. She wasn't just pulling friends now, she was pulling family. Each move was louder, more frantic. Each one told me she was running out of ground to stand on. That night, I opened the folder labeled Proof. I studied it the way a soldier studies maps before a campaign. Screenshots of her laughing messages from the airport. Bank records with hotel charges on nights she claimed to be at work. The frantic voicemails, one after another, her voice cracking with fear. The letter she slid under my door at the inn. Even her father's carefully measured speech. It was all here, cataloged, unshakable. I didn't know yet what I would do with it. But I knew it wasn't for anger or revenge. It was for precision. When the moment came, I wanted Amanda to face herself without escape routes, without the shield of charm or excuses. Silence had built the trap. Proof would close it. On the 17th day, another shift. A message arrived from a mutual friend, someone who owed me nothing but respect. He said Amanda had confessed what she did in Sweden. She told him it was a prank, that she hadn't expected me to take it so hard. His voice lowered when he added, she didn't sound like she believed her own excuse anymore. That detail mattered. For the first time, Amanda was admitting the truth, to someone else, not to me. Silence was forcing her hand. I spent that day walking the coastal cliffs, the North Sea crashing below. My phone stayed in my pocket, buzzing every hour with new attempts, new cracks in the wall she had built. I let the waves drown them out. By the 18th day, I could feel the balance shifting. The silence no longer felt like a shield. It felt like a weapon, not of cruelty, but of clarity. Amanda was unraveling, piece by piece, exposing more than I ever could by shouting. And I knew, standing on those cliffs with the wind tearing through me, that the time to move was coming. Not to end the silence, but to use it, to let it speak louder than words ever could. On the 19th day, I felt the tide turn. Silence had carried me as far as it could on its own. Now it was time to place the weight of truth where it belonged, squarely on Amanda. Not in a fight, not in a shouting match, but in the kind of way that leaves no air left to argue. I booked a meeting room in a small business center near Gothenburg. Neutral ground, quiet, unremarkable. For white walls, a single table, 2 chairs. No distractions. I didn't tell Amanda I was in Sweden, didn't tell her I would see her. I let her find out through a message delivered with surgical precision. I drafted it carefully, just one sentence. If you want answers, meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. here. The address followed. Nothing more. No emotion, no promises. Her response came quickly. Short, frantic. I'll be there. The next morning, I arrived early. I set the folder labeled Proof on the table, every page organized, every recording cued. I didn't bring anger with me. I brought silence. The kind that forces people to fill the space themselves. At 9:58, she walked in. Hair disheveled, eyes ringed with exhaustion, carrying the weight of 2 weeks of chasing shadows. She sat across from me, searching my face for any crack of softness. She found none. She started speaking before I could. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't thought it through. She said she never meant to hurt me, that it was a joke gone wrong. Her words tumbled out like water through broken glass. Loud, fast, desperate. I didn't interrupt. I didn't nod. I let her speak until her voice cracked, until the room grew heavy with the sound of her own unraveling. Only then did I slide the folder toward her. Inside were the screenshots, the bank records, the voicemails, the letter. Every detail of the past weeks, cataloged and undeniable. She flipped through them with trembling hands, her face draining of color. This isn't fair, she whispered finally, but even she didn't sound convinced. Still, I didn't raise my voice. I spoke only once. You had 13 years. You chose silence when it mattered. Now it's mine. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything she had thrown across oceans and phone lines. She tried to reply, but there was nothing left to say. For the first time since the prank in Stockholm, she was quiet. Truly quiet. And in that moment, I knew the silence had done its job. When Amanda finally went silent across that table, it wasn't victory I felt. It was confirmation. The prank, the excuses, the desperate calls, they had all been noise. Now, at last, the noise had stopped. I closed the folder and pulled it back to my side of the table. She reached for it, as if taking it away would erase what it contained. I didn't let her. The proof wasn't for her. It was for me. A record of the truth when lies had been all she offered. She tried again, softer this time. She said she could change. She said we could start over. She promised therapy, forgiveness, anything to patch the fracture. The words hung there, but they had no weight anymore. 13 years of marriage had taught me how to hear her, but 2 weeks of silence had taught me how to finally listen. And what I heard was emptiness. I stood, pushing the chair back slowly. Her eyes followed me, wide, afraid. She asked if I was leaving for good. I didn't answer. Instead, I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Not divorce papers, not threats. Just a printed copy of her own message from Stockholm, the one that began this spiral. Don't be mad. It's just a prank. She stared at it, as if it were a sentence handed down from a judge. In a way, it was. Her own words convicting her in a courtroom of silence. I left her there, in that room filled with nothing but her reflection. Back at the inn, I packed my things methodically. I didn't feel the rush of escape or the heat of anger. I felt order. Calm. Like closing out a mission that had run its course. That night, as I walked along the pier, I thought about what would come next. Amanda had expected me to collapse into her arms the moment she appeared in Sweden. Instead, she had found distance. And that distance wasn't temporary. It was permanent. I didn't plan to return to Denver with her. I didn't plan to share a roof with someone who could abandon me in a foreign country and call it comedy. What I planned was clarity. A lawyer's office, quiet meetings, paperwork filed without spectacle. Amanda had played her hand loudly, desperately. I would play mine quietly, completely. By the time the plane tickets were booked, they had only my name on them. One seat, one direction, not back to her, but forward to something she could no longer touch. And as the wheels of the plane lifted off the Swedish runway, I didn't look back. Silence had brought me here. Silence would carry me home. When my plane touched down in Denver, Amanda wasn't there. She had tried to call, of course, more than 40 times during the flight, but I hadn't answered. I walked through the terminal alone, a single bag over my shoulder, and stepped into the sharp Colorado air with no plan to see her. The silence had already done its work overseas. Now it was time to let it finish here. The first move wasn't dramatic. It was precise. I met with a lawyer downtown, a quiet man named Harris who specialized in clean exits. I slid the folder across his desk, the same one I had shown Amanda in Sweden. He leafed through it without a word, nodding slowly as he read. Finally, he looked up and said only one thing. We'll proceed discreetly. That was all I needed. Amanda must have felt the shift, even without knowing the details. Her messages grew shorter, sharper. She said we needed to talk. She said she could explain. She said everything could go back to normal if I just gave her the chance. But normal was what had gotten us here. Normal was betrayal dressed up as marriage. I didn't reply. Instead, I began moving quietly through the motions of a life without her. Separate accounts, leases in my name alone, keys returned, locks changed. Each step was measured, deliberate. No outbursts, no arguments. Just silence tightening like a rope until the distance became irreversible. Her last attempt to break through came from a mutual friend. He showed up at my office, uninvited, carrying a message from Amanda. She said she would wait for me at the park where we used to walk on Sundays. That she would sit there until I came. I didn't go. That Sunday, I sat on my own porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the mountains. My phone buzzed with notifications, each one more desperate than the last. Photos of the empty bench, her words scribbled in digital ink. I'm here. Please come. Then, hours later, another. You don't even care. But caring and forgiving are not the same thing. I cared enough to leave. Forgiving was no longer in me. By the time the divorce papers were filed, the silence was complete. She had no arguments left, no leverage, no control. The prank in Sweden had been her spark. My silence had been the fire that consumed everything after. And standing in the quiet of my new apartment, surrounded by nothing but my own choices, I realized I didn't need her voice anymore. The silence had spoken louder than she ever could. The day the divorce was finalized, the courthouse hallway felt strangely quiet. Papers shuffled, footsteps echoed, but inside me there was nothing but stillness. Amanda wasn't there. Her lawyer had handled everything on her behalf. Maybe she couldn't face it, or maybe she thought avoiding the moment would soften it. It didn't. Walking out into the sunlight, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. The silence had carried me through every stage, her prank, her panic, her pursuit across oceans. Now it carried me into a life where her voice no longer mattered. Amanda still tried, even after the ink dried. A single message slipped through, written like a confession. I never thought you'd actually leave. It was supposed to be funny. I was stupid. I was wrong. She sent it at midnight, when guilt weighs heaviest. I didn't answer, not because I hadn't read it, but because silence was the only response that matched the truth. Words had failed us long before Sweden. Silence was what revealed everything. I built my new life quietly. A small apartment, nothing extravagant. A new bank account, a new rhythm. Weekends hiking trails outside Denver. Evenings reading instead of arguing. Friends asked questions, some gently, some blunt. I never gave details. All I said was, "We're done." That was enough. Sometimes I thought about Elsa, not as a person, but as an idea. One word I had written in a moment of cold calculation. One word that unraveled Amanda more than any accusation ever could. Elsa wasn't real, but the fear she represented was. That fear had pulled the mask off Amanda faster than truth serum. 51 calls unanswered. Dozens of messages ignored. Each one a crack in the image she had built. And when she finally broke, it wasn't because I yelled, or accused, or fought. It was because I didn't. Silence had been my weapon. Silence had been my shield. And in the end, silence had been my answer. Months later, I passed through the same airport where she had left me stranded. Different flight, different destination, but the same terminal. I paused for a moment, watching passengers rush past with bags and tickets, all in a hurry to get somewhere. I remembered standing here alone, holding a useless boarding pass while she laughed on her way home. That memory didn't sting anymore. It felt like a beginning, a reminder of the exact moment when I chose to stop playing her game. Some men fight back loud. Some men beg, plead, shout to be heard. I learned that silence speaks louder. It strips away excuses, it exposes truth, and it leaves no space for manipulation. I walked toward my gate with nothing but a quiet calm in my chest. I hadn't won by fighting Amanda. I hadn't won by chasing her across continents. I had won by refusing to play at all. And as the plane lifted into the night sky, I realized the silence was no longer about her. It was about me. A new life, built not on noise, but on clarity, on peace, on quiet. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.